Riverside, New Brunswick.
Riverview.
Sorry.
It's okay. That's right.
Riverview, New Brunswick. And we're conducting an interview for the Understanding Social Work Leadership in Canada Oral History Project. And so I'm going to do a reconsent. You received the letter of information and had an opportunity to read it. Do you have any questions about the letter?
No, I'm fine with it.
Super. So I just want to remind you that we're using two methods of recording today, the voice recorder and the video camera. The voice recorder is used to create transcripts. The transcripts will be used to caption the video material. And so the video material will be made public through YouTube. We have a program site, through the digital repository at McMaster University, which is a loaning system of the library and also an archival system. And we will also offer a set to Library and Archives Canada as a complement to the original oral history project. So there'll be sort of 3 locations where the material will be available. But prior to making the material publicly available, we will provide you with a copy of your transcript. You can review your transcript, and if there's anything you would like edited, corrected, or to re-record something, we're happy to accommodate that. So we won't make anything public until you sign a final consent form. So do you consent to be audio recorded?
Yes.
And to be video recorded?
Yes.
And for the material to be used as described?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So Nancy, thank you for your time and your energy and your generous your generous donation and gift of your time. Maybe we can start with a conversation about your early years, your growing up, and whether there was anything in those early years that pointed you in the direction of social work.
Well, thank you for that question. And it's always a pleasure to answer this question because I grew up in rural Nova Scotia and down in Cumberland County. And my aunt, who was my favorite aunt, was a social worker. So she was doing her work in rural Nova Scotia down in Halifax and Antigonish. So I used to go with her. Now, in those days, I could go with her. I was like 5 years old. I'd sit in the car and I'd look out the window when she'd go in to do the home visits. And what was always intriguing is she did some visits in the Africville and some of those places. And I always looked out to the children. I go, oh my goodness, they would be so interesting to know. And so I sort of got the idea about, like, what wouldn't I like to be a social worker when I grow up? Maybe I would, And definitely my grandmother, her voice was in my head, you've got to go to university. And it was never a question. I always wanted to go to university. But my grandmother also, she patched her income. She did everything from running a store to having a boarding house to whatever. So I think she was trying to plant that seed that women need to have, an education so they can earn money. So that was always in my head. So yes, so that's where I got my first taste of social work.
Excellent, excellent. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about going to university. So where did you go to university and what did you study?
Well, there's a long story, but I'll try to condense it. So I didn't go to university right after high school. I actually moved here to Moncton to live with that aunt that I'm talking about, my favorite aunt. And I wanted to go to university, but my aunt and uncle said, well, that's a lot of money, and maybe you should go to business college. I go, yuck! I didn't want to go to business college, but hey, I learned how to type and I learned how to do shorthand and all things like that. So, but I was still in my mind like, this would give me a job, right? So after that, a few years later, I saw they had a Bachelor of Social Work program at a distance here in Moncton, offered at the University of Moncton through St. Thomas. So I started taking some courses there. And my very first professor, John, he now lives in Ontario, and he was always such a big influence to me because he was such a passionate social worker. And so my very first course on introduction in history, of course, and all that. So I did some of the courses there through that distance program. And so I was a parent at this time. So I managed to work and do that. So latterly, that course was stopped. So unfortunately, and in the meantime, I got a divorce and I had 2 young children. So it was like, well, how am I going to do this? What's my chances of getting my degree? But I'm going to get it. So eventually I heard about this program in Vermont at Norwich University that offered a degree program, a bachelor's program. So I did go there. It was a distance program, and I worked on looking at different issues you could design your own program. So I did family therapy and genealogy and women's studies. So that was part of what I did. I also picked up some more courses. I had a university professor who was able to do a program with me, a course. So I kept getting courses here and there and trying to get my degree. So eventually I got my degree, and it was fascinating to do that genealogy and family therapy because that interested me a lot. And in the meantime, I started a nonprofit organization for support to single parents. And from there, I learned a lot of hands-on social work practices. So that's a short and long story. And then later on, I did my master's through Sen because, again, I couldn't get the master's program in social work in the area. So I became a registered social worker through our New Brunswick Association.
Okay, excellent. And what did you study at St.
I studied adult education because I see the marriage between social work and adult education. And I often think sometimes our degrees are a little too narrow in social work, that we need to understand that there's the practice of, the therapy and all that, but there's also the community development. So I focused on community development and my master's, and, I could see the two of them really nicely fitting together.
Absolutely. My doctoral degree is in adult ed. So.
Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah. From which university?
From Boise.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes. Yeah. So you see what I mean, like that. There's a marriage there. Yeah.
Absolutely, for sure. And social work certainly is an interdisciplinary profession.
Yes, exactly.
So could you, if you don't mind me asking, what year did you finish your BSW and what year did you finish your MSW? Just so we have a sense of what.
Okay, so that wasn't the name of the degree. So I finished I'm trying to think, I finished in 1991 my degree after like 15 years of going through all of that, right? And that was a very big thing. I had my children come so they could see mom graduating, and that was in Vermont. And then the next year, I started my master's at St. So, and I finished that, I started in 92 and I finished in 96 because I had to wait till the spring to graduate. So, and that they were both thesis based. So that was interesting because I really liked my own designing my studies because I'm very disciplined in that way. So when the kids would be doing stuff, I say, well, mom's doing her work now. So it was helpful to do the thesis as well, to create your writing abilities in that. So, yeah.
Excellent. And do you want to tell us a bit about your thesis topic?
Yeah, the first one like I said, was on family therapy and genealogy, and I'm trying to remember the actual title of it. And the second one for the master's was looking at women's learning and the barriers of women's learning. And so it was around, interviews of meeting women and looking at their lives and intersections with the learning opportunities and things like that. It's been a while since I looked at those theses, but it was very exciting because I'd have my dining room table covered with little pieces of paper and like what to put into the thesis. I also took a course through UNB on research. I did that as a supplementary course just to understand research and how this works. And I liked that because I was in a class with other people, and so I learned about what they were doing. And I'm a people person, so I enjoyed that part because when you're on your own, you're often left to, okay, now what do I do, sort of thing. So yeah, but that was really fun. And I had planned to go on to do a PhD, but at that point, I was tired. I had the children and they were getting older, and I thought, okay, so I haven't even read anything for outside of, academia. So maybe I should just take a break and like take some time for me. And I also wanted to study French. So that was a challenge that I wanted to take on. So,
Excellent. You mentioned that you started a not-for-profit. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. Okay. This is one of the highlights. Sometimes you get these ideas, and then I thought, well, I need a job. I'm a single parent now, so I had worked in nonprofit before at different agencies. So I got this idea. I thought, in our community, there's not a lot of support, especially for young single moms. Okay. So I have a good friend. We're good friends, and we'd heard about this program in Alberta called Terra. And it was actually like a school, courses for single parents, including driving and childcare and all kinds of things. So I said to her, we should go there. Now I didn't have a penny, like I was totally like working on a shoestring. So I said, well, I have a life insurance policy. I'm going to cash that in and we're going to go. So we went, and it kind of gave me the impetus to, look, that looks like something we could have here. But at that time, that was early 80s, people kept saying, well, there's no money. And I'm going, well, in the government. I go, well, yeah, there must be. So fortunately, I was able to get a grant to do what we call a needs assessment. And I interviewed 50 single moms in the area. And we started like support groups and interventions like that. And that's how it started. And from there, it grew into a lot of different things, focusing on everything from interpartner violence to poverty. And it grew into support to single parents, because we realized, of course, there's men out there that every woman had a partner somewhere. And some of the dads are parenting on their own. And it became more than just the young parent. It was parents of all ages and stages. So it was quite a privilege to do that. And I did that for 34 years. And that was a long time. And then I was retiring. So.
Okay. Wow. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit more, because, part of the goal of the project is around leadership. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the important aspects or the important actions that you undertook in creating that new organization. Like, what were some of the things that you needed to do that helped you succeed?
Well, I think first of all, it was to partner with social workers that I knew in the community. So there was a social worker at the hospital, the French hospital, and one at the English hospital, and others in the community. So I asked to meet with them and talk about what do they see at the issues. So building relationships, I think, was crucial, and finding out like what was the data that was out there. And of course, people are willing to help you, and they did confirm that there was this need. So that was kind of my, I guess, raison d'etre, if you want, throughout my career, was to partner with people and learn about the issues, and especially with social workers, because I'd go to any kind of conferences or anything that I could to find out, what's going on in the community. And also the justice model, not a charity model. I think that was very important to me, that we don't just give out things. We've got to find out what are the issues around justice and policy changes that need to happen. So I learned about that, and that was really important, because you can certainly do, give out the food or give out the clothes, but if you don't change things, So I guess, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So you said you worked there for 35 years and then retired.
Yes.
So what happened after you retired?
Well, what happened was, at that time, and that was in 2015, 16, that I was deciding that. And, there's a lot of nonprofit agencies in the world and in Moncton, and getting the money to continue was going to be difficult. And so I said to my board, here's the option. You can raise a bunch of money, because I want to retire, or we can take the organization and give some of these programs to other organizations. And because to hire a director, nobody's going to work for this. Like, I know that, right? So we decided to do that. So we put these programs in other organizations. They adopted them, if you want. And so the organization closed, but the programs existed in other places. Now, I know it was a loss for the community, but I thought, I need to do something for me, and I'm not going to be working in this forever. And if they wanted to do it, that's fine. So anyway, that's what happened. So some of those programs still exist. I mean, we have programs for interpartner violence and other kinds of things that went into other areas. So that made me feel happy. So that was in June 2016. And then somebody said to me, oh, did you ever think of applying to the Senate? And I go, the Senate? Because I guess they knew that I was always politicizing issues. So I did apply in August 2016, and I got the call in October to go to the Senate. Wow. So I didn't really, and I met Senator Bernard. She was appointed at the same time as I was, so that was a lucky day for me. Wow. Yeah, so that was kind of a shock, because I didn't expect that, but they were saying you apply and you can be chosen, and so, yeah, so I really hadn't had a retirement.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
What is the process of applying like? What sort of things does the Senate look for when a senator is appointed?
That's a good question. Now, at that point, they were saying nonpartisan, never had any been appointed or elected to a government, all this and that, and you have to have 3 references. It's all done online. So it was an application that I found, I'm not good with technology, I found it difficult, but to sort of tell your story and the key points of why you want to be there and what would you bring to the Senate. So I was used to giving other people that, oh, Terry, you can do that, I'll write you a reference. But for myself, it was a little difficult to say, okay, who am I asking? So I found that was a bit onerous to do that, especially online. I'm better if I can meet you and I can convince you that I'm the one. So anyway, a couple of days before I got the official call, I got a call from the Privy Council. They wanted all my relatives living and dead so they could do criminal checks.
Wow.
And my husband, I remarried, latterly. And so I thought, oh my gosh, maybe there's skeletons I don't even know about. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we went through that, and you have to own a property in Canada worth $4,000. Okay. So that was part of the stipulation. So then I get the call. They said, you're going to get a call, be in a quiet place. And the Prime Minister called me. And I was like, oh my gosh. And asked me if I would let my name go forward. So that's kind of how it went. But now I know it's a little more partisan. I think more people have had connections that are appointed from the Liberal Party, which is fine. But it's a different process. And maybe they've been elected or something. And that's fine. But I was in the second group of the independent senators that were appointed. And that was in the early days of when they just started changing the process. So we were new, totally new. Wow. But anyway.
So what did you say when you answered the question about why do you want to do this?
Well, I said because I believe the experience I've had as a social worker and a community developer, that there's a lot of policies that need to be addressed. And I think my experience would be important to be in the Senate when we're looking at legislation. Kind of basically, I mean, there wasn't a lot of space, so kind of, and I think you had to send if you had any awards and stuff. So I think that helped to know that I had awards for the work I did in gender equality and stuff like that. So yeah, basically, I have something that would be unique to the Senate, because I think in the past, a lot of people were partisan appointments who were good people, but they didn't necessarily have the grassroots experience. Yeah. Mm.
So what awards have you won?
Oh, good question. Okay, so I have the Order of New Brunswick, which I've got on me right now, and I just got that a couple of days before I got the appointment. And I have the Person's Case Award that's from the Governor General. I don't know if you know about that. Well, that's an interesting one because it's for your work with gender equity and things like that. So every year, the Governor General, people send in nominations for you, and then they pick people from across the country. I think there's 5, because it goes back to the Person's Case, the famous 5, the women who helped get us the vote. So that was quite an honor. And when I went to Ottawa, that was in 2011, I felt like I was a queen. All of a sudden, wow, this is neat. You meet the Governor General and all this stuff. And that was really, really fun. And so I've had some other community awards that from the Dalhousie University Health and different ones, Spiritus Award from the province of New Brunswick. So a few different ones. So I was fortunate to be nominated. And I always said, I'm taking it for the team. It's not about me. It's about all of us here that work towards these issues. But I feel very privileged to go on behalf of the people that, don't always have a voice. Mm. Mm.
So what is it like I'm assuming there's some kind of orientation or training that happens when you join the Senate? What is that like?
You would hope. I think it was very overwhelming. I think as time goes on, they're doing a little better, and there's more people that are independent now. So basically, you get there, and the first day, you're here and there and everywhere throughout the Senate to hear about your phone, where do you want your number, all these things, and all of a sudden you're going, oh my gosh. And then, you got to pick somebody to walk you down the aisle when you get sworn in. Well, I didn't know anybody. So I knew Kim Pate, because she and I got the Person's Case the same day, but I didn't know who to get, so I found someone. So when you get sworn in, there were 6 of us that got sworn in the same day. Senator Bernard came laterally, but anyway, so you're sitting in your chair and you're looking around and go, oh my goodness, like now what? But we were fortunate in that first group because one of the clerks from the Senate would take every Wednesday afternoon after Senate and teach us about the procedures and policy, because the book and the rules are like totally, like it's like you went to a different country. But eventually, as time went on, you do learn, and I learned, but it was very overwhelming the first few months because it's not like anything I'd ever done. And I met my best friend there, my new best friend. She got sworn in the same day. She's from Aurelia. And so we became close, and we debrief and go, well, what does that mean? What does this mean? And, so there was help along the way. So when new people came in after me, I always took time to say, do you know where the bathrooms are? Do you know where the coffee is? Do you have any questions? Because you were just totally like you didn't know any, maybe other people had a different experience, but I was totally in a shock.
And do you want to say who the person from Aurelia is?
Oh, sure. Gwen Boniface, Senator Boniface. Yeah. Yeah. And her experience was in policing before. So we kind of were close because social work and policing have some things in common. And so we just became the best of friends and remained friends throughout the whole time. So I was fortunate to have someone I could talk to, because you're away from your family, you're away from your friends, and your life's changed forever. And people go, oh, you must love it. And you go, yeah, I love it. But I said I was terra-sighted. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You mentioned having someone walk you down the aisle.
Yes.
Who walked you down?
It was Senator McCoy. And she was an older woman in the Senate. She'd been in the Senate for quite a long time, but somebody had mentioned, I think it was the Black Rod, said she might be a good person. She's organizing the independent senators group. So I thought, well, okay. So she was from Alberta. I thought, okay, like I don't know some people here. Like now there's more people I would know. But anyway, so she was helpful in some ways because she had been there for a long time. Now, her background was more in the Conservative Party, but then she came to the Independent. So I learned like, okay, so there's you grow here. So anyway, but she was a old-fashioned politician, if you want. She knew stuff, and so that was good. Like she'd have little gatherings in her office, and people like Joe Clark would show up, and different people, and I go, oh my goodness, Anyway.
Right. Yeah. Because they're workmates, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's interesting. So, what is the day-to-day operation of the Senate like? What's it like to be a senator on a day-to-day basis?
Well, people would think, what do they do? Well, I'll tell you, we are quite busy. So you have to choose to be on a couple of committees as I guess for your responsibilities. Okay, sit in the Senate when the Senate sits. And you have a lot of accountability on your timing, and when you're in there, your attendance is taken, which it should be. Any job it would be. Second of all, you have to sit on two committees. So I picked Indigenous People and Human Rights, and I got on those two committees, and I stayed on those most of my time. I was on fisheries for a while, and I was like a fish out of water, but I learned. And then you have community activities. So when I'd be home, I might get to go speak at a school, or I might get to go to an annual meeting, or I might get to go to whatever. So your time is quite swallowed up. So you're there from Monday to Thursday night. Okay, but Thursday night you could sit late and only get home Friday. So you're expected to be there between September and June. Now there's a break in January where you're not there. So you're busy, and you can be as busy as you want. So I did a few projects at home with some different things on mental health and other stuff, because I wanted people to know I was still alive, that I didn't go to Ottawa and fall in a bubble. I also created a monthly newsletter, which was created with a friend from here to put out to be what is going on in the Senate and what's going on in the community, so that people would know, because people don't know. Most people don't know what the Senate is. So we have an office, you have to have staff. So I had a great staffer for the whole time. I mean, he's amazing. I had other staff, but he was the one who stuck with me the whole 8 years. So, you have to have that support. So yeah, so it's a busy life. But it's exciting. I miss, there's going to be a meeting tonight of whatever. You could choose. You get like maybe 50 invitations a week for stuff. So you have to decide. So, but that was exciting, to go to different things, meet different people, and learn, and yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So what were some of the issues that were central to the committees that you were sitting on during the time you were there?
Well, I'd say one of the committees that I most enjoyed was the Indigenous Peoples Committee, because in New Brunswick, Indigenous people are here, but not really taken notice of, right? So we were studying issues across the country of different Indigenous people, and in the committees, the witnesses come on the subjects. Okay, Indigenous people would come to the Senate, talk about the issue. So, for example, missing and murdered Aboriginal women and girls. That was the subject we talked about. We talked about, truth and reconciliation. What does that mean, and how does that work? And so there was a lot of different things. And I was told, I'm proud of this, is that I asked really good questions. And I think that comes from being a social worker. So I guess to say that being a social worker and trained in that questioning, I could ask a witness question, or if I saw the look that they didn't quite finish, I'd say, tell me something more about that, or whatever. So it was a pleasure to be in a group that I learned, but also it was painful sometimes, talking about the burial grounds where the people had been found in the schools and residential schools and all that. I mean, there's so much, but I felt proud that I could actually contribute to the process, and we do reports after, and those reports would go back to government. So it was a very exciting, and also seeing that some of the Indigenous communities were getting they were getting detached, if you want, from governments, supposing they became independent from the government overseeing them, that sort of thing. So that was exciting. Human rights was interesting too. Our first time we did a prison study across Canada, and that was suggested by one of my colleagues, you can imagine. And that was hard, Tara. That was tough, going into prison. I had not been into prison before, a federal prison. And I learned a lot, because people go, oh yeah, they have it easy there. Well, no, it's not that easy. And I remember walking with this fellow one day. He was going across we were walking from point A to point B, and I think it was in Ontario somewhere. And I said to him, he was an inmate, I said, so what brought you here? And he said, well, my mother was on drugs and I was in a bad area. And, he was talking all about that. So, there's things that happen to people that the general public don't understand. But being a social worker, I saw young children in need for early intervention. So I picked up on that. And then you'd see seniors in there, elderly, with mental health issues. So these are all issues that relate to our profession, right? So it was interesting, but it was painful. And then after that, we did some studies on Muslims in Canada and how they've been, oppressed, and how they've been mistreated. And we did studies on racism and things like that. So we studied a lot. We studied women in Afghanistan. There was a lot of different studies that happened. And it was always fulsome and interesting, but painful, because these are things that are still existing in our country, like Muslim women being, harassed and things like that. So, and having the witness in front of you, who's actually a woman from, it's evocative. So that was interesting. So the committee work is good, but I think two of my favorite things that I did was being on the social work with CSW and Senator Bernard, and every year we'd plan something with them, an event on social work month and on the Hill. And that was good because it kind of helped us to be in our profession, if you want, and promote it. And so I really enjoyed that, having those events. So, and the other area that I worked on, that I was the co-chair for Canada-Cuba. And that was interesting. I love Cuba. I love the Cuban people. And I know it's really, really hard, and especially difficult, going to be even more difficult with current political situation. So that was interesting as well. So a lot of things I gravitated towards that would be in my area of interest, but I also tried to do things that I knew nothing about,
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if I could return you for a moment to social work on the Hill.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that? I'm not sure everyone knows about it.
Okay. So with CSW, they always were doing social work on the Hill before we got there, before Senator Bernard and I got there. So I remember coming upon they had an event in the early days. Yeah, it was in it must have been 2017 in March. So I went in, I saw that they had a display, and I said, oh my goodness. So that's when I got interested, and I said, can we do something with this? So we would have an event, and the last event we had was at the John A. Macdonald Centre, and so people were invited to participate from all the government and community, and so they'd have speakers, and we had when we changed I'm going to get this mixed up, maybe you can help me with this. The new what are the principles, or what are social workers? There's 7 or 8 different things that we are. Do you remember? You know what that is?
So, like the definition of social work or the code of ethics?
Yeah, they changed that, and there was like 7 or 8 things that to be a social worker, these are who you are. So they launched that at the last one. These are the things that to be a social worker, you need to be, empathetic, you need to be this, and this. So they launched something like that at one of these events. And so then Senator Bernard and I got to speak, and, they had lunch and they had, lots of things going on to promote social work. And we got a great response from the community, like lots of people would come. And so it was a great way to detail our profession or show it. But in the past, when COVID was on, we did it online. That was tough. So social workers would join in, and we did subjects of, we looked at interpartner violence as one subject. We looked at basic income as another subject. So Senator Bernard and I would be speakers, and we'd have people speak with us. But it was tough doing it online. And you knew people were signing on, but you can't see them. So every year was a bit different, but the last one was in person. I was so pleased about that because we were able to do it and have a great crowd. So I think it was I think it continued this year. I think Senator Bernard did it this March, and she said she missed me, and I said, oh, I miss you too.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Some folks refer to the Senate as the chamber of sober second thought.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you could say what that means or how you understand that definition.
That's a good question, and I didn't understand that till I got there, because I guess what the premise of that statement is that we review the legislation after it goes from the House of Commons. It cannot be passed until we review it, right? Like, it has to be studied. So this is where people don't understand second sober thought, or however they say that, is that it's not just like, oh yeah, we got that, check that off. So for example, I'll give you one of the main bills that I was very enthusiastic about was medical assistance in dying, which has some social work, parts to it, right? So we had, that came back from the House. So we, they hope it will just, get it checked off and send it back so it can be, go to law. So we studied that bill, Tara, for 100 hours. 100 hours of speeches. It goes to committee too, goes to different committees to be looked at. So the committees then study, and they actually have witnesses who come. So one of the key people is Senator Kuchar, he's from Halifax. I don't know if you know the name. So he did a lot of speaking about it in the Senate because he knew what that meant as a medical doctor. We have in the Senate maybe 5 or 6 medical doctors. So that was helpful to us, because if it's just people talking about the law, you have to understand the physicality of it. So that was 100 hours, and then there were some amendments made, and that's another thing. The Senate can make amendments. Not always liked that we do that. So there was 3 or 4 amendments that went back to the House. Well, they accepted a couple of them, but the one that I wish they would have accepted is about when you get Alzheimer's or dementia, you have to, if you early stage, you have to choose. You can't do that for the later on, or you can't have your family do it. So that needs to change, because that doesn't give, if I get that, I can't make that decision. But if I have cancer, I can. So there's needs to be work on that part. But some other parts are working well, and we notice a lot more people are using medical assistance in dying. But there was a lot of pushback from the Senate, because a lot of the people there have older parents, or they're older, and some people didn't like this idea. But anyway, just to say, so second sober thought, or
sober second
thought is not just boom, it's really studying up. And I think if the Senate was abolished, we wouldn't have that. And in the House, it's a lot of partisan decisions, of course. If the party believes X, then they want to support that. In the Senate now, with independent, nonpartisan, it's a better chance to have a different look.
Yes, a very careful reading of the nuance
in
the policy.
Yes, and we don't have to get elected, so we don't need to be, out there, Of course, people do send us notes and tell us what they think, but that's fine.
Excellent. Well, maybe you could tell us a little bit about that. What's it like to be the face of decision making, and to perhaps have people question or want to advocate for particular points of view to you as a senator?
There are some good parts and some bad parts. Like, you get people who were totally supportive of some of the laws, and there's other people. During the convoy, when that was in Ottawa, that was tough, because if you were in Ottawa at that time, I don't know if you probably saw it on the news, and they overtook the city, and the people in the businesses and things like that were very upset, like the coffee shop where I went, the hairdresser, blah, blah. They couldn't carry on their business, or the malls. So when the Prime Minister was pushing for the Emergency Act to happen so that they could get that stopped, there were people that wrote to me, a few people that were upset about that, democracy and da. Well, you're not in Ottawa. So I had to think carefully, what would be the thing that would work for the people in this city, the seniors, the coffee shops, the whatever. And so I had to decide whether I was going to vote on that. But I guess fortunately or unfortunately, it came to, the law was passed without us having to vote in the Senate. So, but there's tricky things, like example, if there's a postal strike. Like I've always been very in favor of NDP and Labour, but there was a postal strike a few years ago about, it was around Christmas, and the part-time workers and, were on strike, and rural workers, and then the businesses were trying to get their packages out. So you're kind of like, well, what's the thing here, So those are things that are challenging as an individual. So you have to go with not what I think, but what's, the best for Canadian. It might be different in New Brunswick than in Alberta, if it was about a pipeline or something. There's different, issues to be considered. Yeah.
Were there particular things, like, I'm just like want to know more about the Senate?
Yeah.
Were there other favorite things that happened? Were there particular events that happened during your tenure that really resonated for you, or that you were excited to be a part of?
Well, there's events, but I want to say one of the things I'm very proud of is when I got to the Senate, I was curious about the policies of the people in the workplace, not for myself, but for my staff, because I'd heard rumblings that some of the younger staff or people that were, not as advantaged or outspoken, like were being harassed. And I'd heard that, and I knew there was a particular senator that I'd heard that that was something happening there. So I called up HR and I said, well, what about the policies for, that? And he said, oh, Senator, don't worry. We'll take care of you. We'll make sure you get counseling. I go, I'm not talking about me. So that was my first indication of a problem. So I looked at the policies, and they hadn't been updated for a long time. And one of the things in the policies was that if a person's harassed, a staffer, the whip of the party would be looking after. Well, the whip is the friend of, you know what I'm saying? We didn't have a whip in our caucus, but thinking, oh, that doesn't make sense. So anyway, after a time, I was asked to sponsor a bill that's under the workplace labor code, and that was on workplace harassment. Bill C-65, and I thought, okay, I found my sweet spot. So I was able to sponsor that bill, and because it came from the House to us, and so it went through the process, committees, interviews, and all that. And at the same time, we were looking at how can we change the policies in the Senate workplace policy. So that bill, along with changing the policies, I'm proud of that because, see, in the Senate, the staffers are not permanent staff. So I can say, well, you didn't do that for me. Go, you're done. Or, there was some things where I hear of maybe somebody would be going to the room of the person they're on traveling and, or they'd say whatever. Like they were oppressed. You know what I'm saying? So this changes the water on the beans, if you want, because now policies are in place. And also, it's mandatory for all senators to have training on that. On harassment. It could be as much as yelling. I've seen people yelling at their staff, and it doesn't have to be sexual harassment. It could be other kinds of harassment. So I'm proud of that, Tara. I'm proud because I felt like that was in something I believe in, and that I, along with the team, we were able to make some changes, which changed for all federally regulated employers. Okay, so it's not not like everybody, but most places have it. We had it at our agency, so. Why wouldn't the top of the chain have it, right? Anyway, so I'm proud of that.
Excellent. Were there particular issues that were relevant to the province of New Brunswick that you were able to promote?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'm just trying to think about. Well, I think I've always been very pro looking at some kind of a guaranteed livable income. That hasn't happened yet here in New Brunswick, but I was able to at least stir the pot. Things on mental health and those kind of things that are relevant to us here. We've had a change in government in New Brunswick. So I'm a little more hopeful now that maybe some things will move forward a bit more in some of these issues. and I'll keep abreast of that. But I don't see necessarily that things. Oh, one that did change on diabetes for access to insulin in New Brunswick. Now, I'm not going to take total responsibility for that, but I was on the juvenile diabetes type 1 caucus, and my grandson has type 1. So that was a happy moment when I heard New Brunswick was opening up for that. Now, I'm not going to take that I was, but I did, work here locally on some of those issues. But there's so many issues that are across the country are distinct to the province. Now, I'm happy to hear that trade barriers are going to be down across the country, because if you're living in Nunavut and you're living in Halifax, it could be totally different on stuff, right? And I'm also pleased to see that we're going to have pharmacare, and that's also for diabetes, and also we're going to have dental care. So those are things that will affect all of us. But it's a bit disjointed because not everybody understands how this all flows, right? In one country, things are disjointed, you know.
Yeah, for sure. There are definite differences from province to province.
Exactly.
Even though we have a federal health care plan.
Exactly.
We have a
Yeah.
provincial administration.
Exactly.
There are
And who's the head of your province dictates different things, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Any other Senate stories that you'd like to share before we move on?
I guess to say, Tara, I'm very honored and privileged to have met so many wonderful people, not only senators, but staffers and people in Ottawa. And one of the things when I got there, I was like, I said, I was a bit terror excited. I was, well, how do I break in here? What does a social worker do? So I said, okay, I'm going to meet everybody in the chamber. There's 105, and I'm going to go over and I'm going to go, well, I'm Nancy, I'm from New Brunswick. Where are you from, Tara? And just kind of make that link. I don't care what your politics are. I put that on the back burner. So I got to meet a lot of people, and I was known as being a very collaborative person and very open and things like that. And so that's what I miss. And I learned, like, if you're living in Nunavut or Newfoundland, like, what's your culture? What do you do there? And we were very fortunate. We had different cultural groups in our Senate. And one of my very favorite people, of course, is Senator Bernard, who I learned so much from. And I became her ally on issues around racism. And I learned a lot about that. So that's the part of the story that is I'll keep in my heart, and when we changed a law, for example, we changed "Oh Canada," the words to "all of us." I remember that night, and it was so exciting because we're inclusive now. So things like that are the things that are precious. It's not the big stuff; it's the little stuff, and I'm really honored and privileged to have had that experience. And I never expected that was not on my list of what I want to do when I grow up, to be a senator. But I'm very, very privileged to have had that opportunity. And I will deeply miss those relationships, which I'll keep in touch with some, of course. But it is a part of your life. And if I ever do write my memoirs, I'll put a chapter in there on the Senate. Yeah.
Wow. All right. So I think that there is now a required retirement from the Senate,
Absolutely.
and you have retired.
I have reached that age of 75. And people say, you can't be 75. No. And I said, well, maybe they made a mistake on my birth certificate. But that is it. And I think that's good. I think we need to make sure that we open it up for other people. Now, I noticed the appointments are becoming a bit younger, like 57, 58. So they'll have a long run, where some of us were in our 60s. So, but that's fine. But it's just to say that one of the senators from New Brunswick had said it should be an 8-year term. And that might be true. I don't know for sure. But, there's people in there that are, I'll say, lifers. Like, they've been in there and they're going to stay right through. And that's all they've done. I feel honored and privileged that I have had opportunities to do other things. And I'm not done yet. Like, I still want to do stuff in my community. I'm not sure exactly what yet, but people get, well, why can't you just garden or something? I go, no, I can't. I feel like I have things that I still want to be involved with. And maybe I won't be the front runner or the leader, but I want to be a backroom singer somehow and try to, make sure things are moving forward.
So what is it, like, what do you do to wrap up your time in the Senate? Like, sometimes succession planning or endings can be really important in leadership. So
Yes.
how did you do that? How did you prepare to leave?
Well, because I'm a social worker, I kind of look at, well, who could replace me? You don't need to do that. So I looked on my various committees, and the type 1 juvenile diabetes one, I asked a senator from Alberta who I knew her husband had type 1 at 66, which is unusual. I said, Karen, would you be willing to do that? She said yes. Cuba, I asked a friend from Newfoundland, a senator, I said, would you be willing to? You don't have to do that. You can just walk out. But I thought, no, I really want to make sure those committees they have good representation. So what they do is they have, before you leave, they have a tribute day, okay, in the Senate. So mine was December the 10th, which is Human Rights Day, which I was so pleased. So my children live in BC, different parts of BC, and I have sisters in London, and my husband's here, and different people. So I thought, I'll ask the kids. Now, they may not be that interested in coming. Maybe it's before Christmas. And anyway, they all said yes. So I had about 14 people of guests. My granddaughter came, was 14, and she hadn't been to the Senate. Now, my grandson had. He'd been there 3 times. He said, Grandma, I don't want to go this time. I go, that's fine. You've been here. So anyway, so they came. And so what happens is the senators, they pick for certain people, just I don't know how they arrange it, but in different groups, will do a tribute to you. So, for example, Senator Bernard did a lovely tribute to me, and my friend Gwen, she did one, and some other leaders. So you're listening to all that. Well, it's very embarrassing because you're like, oh my gosh, and they talk about you and your contributions, and they quote from some things you said. So that went on for 15 or 20 minutes or so, and then I get to speak. So I had prepared myself what I was going to say, I had my notes and everything, and that was a privilege to do that. And, I wanted to shout out to people who've helped me there, like the people in the cafeteria, the protective people, the Black Rod, the leaders, So I was able to shout out, to them and my experience, and also to, just a little summary of how I felt being a senator. And, it was very helpful to be able to have those words. And I quoted from Leonard Cohen, about let the light get in, there's a crack and everything, and different things. I was able to really wrap it up. So then after that, there's a reception later in the day by the speaker. She has a reception, and your family and your Senate colleagues go, and you get to have, some goodies, wine and things like that, and pictures and stuff. So that was nice. And then that evening, my guests and I and my staff went to the parliamentary dining room for supper with everybody. So it was nice to bring everybody together. But it was kind of weird because after that, next couple of days, there were a few others that were retiring. And then I came home. And then Christmas came. And then I was not retiring until January, but I didn't go back because, the government prorogued, and we weren't sitting anyway, so I didn't get to say goodbye in the way I wanted to, because that I was overwhelmed with all that, and that was nice, but it was a bit overwhelming. So I'm going back in May, the end of May. I'm on my way to Calgary, so I'm stopping for a few days in Ottawa because I get to go back one more time, kind of to, whatever. And so I'll see some of my colleagues, my staff, Anthony. I mean, he's an amazing young man, and his family. So that will be kind of a nice little closure. Because when you're replaced, you don't know who it's going to be. I mean, several people in New Brunswick came to me and said, do you think I should apply? And I go, well, absolutely. So the person that got it in Moncton, she had asked me, and I said, yes, Dawn, go ahead. She was our mayor. Go ahead. So she's the one who got it. So she got appointed on Women's Day. And I remember feeling, it was kind of bittersweet. I really am done now, And I'm happy for her. I'm glad for her. But it's also the fact of, I'm not there. That's not my job anymore. So you pass the torch. And anyway, and then all of a sudden your email goes down and your website goes down. You go, oh yeah. So it's kind of, a weird thing. Like at the agency, it was different because when we closed, we had a celebration party, and then I'm still here. So I still see people and still, but it was a different, wrapping up, but that's how they do it. Yeah.
So a new chapter is beginning.
Yes.
What do you think the new chapter will focus on?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, they've already started to declutter. So my husband had hip surgery in January. He got the surgery the day I retired, January 31st. So that kept me busy. But I thought, well, I'm in the house, so I might as well do something. So I started decluttering, and part of the decluttering involved looking back at some of the memorabilia and the souvenirs I had from my life, in my work life and my past life and all this. And so I started putting things together. And I thought, well, maybe I could do a little memoir at some point. And I don't want to write a chronological story from A to Z, but I want to maybe put this together somehow. So, and I started exercising because I haven't done much fitness since I sit a lot in the job. I was sitting a lot. So I started line dancing and exercising and hiking and stuff. And just choosing, like, what do I want to be involved with here? So I'm looking out there to see, well, what is it? But I like the creative side. I like the photo voice things. I like that sort of thing. And I'm sure there's something there. Like, I'm not sure just exactly. But my good friend, who was former mayor of Riverview, she said, Nancy, take your time. So I'm taking my time. I'm trying to think about what would be right for me now in recreating myself. Because the word retirement, it sounds too like it's like a termination, or I don't know. I don't like the word. So recreating myself. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I think a lot of social workers, they retire from a job, but
Yeah.
not from social work.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
find other ways to do it.
Yep.
So they create new work for themselves, new roles for themselves. You mentioned photo voice, and it sounds like you've been involved in a couple of photo voice projects. I wonder if you want to say a little bit about photo voice and the kinds of projects that you've been involved with.
Certainly. Well, photo voice was an excellent way to help people tell their story, because we can do interviews and things like that. And I've always, in my work, I've always had focus groups in the projects we had. We had many projects through the years. But when Lynn, my friend Lynn, she said, have you heard of this? And she was a professor at UNB Nursing. She said, we could do a photo voice project with the women here and look at some of their issues around health and wellness and that. Anyway, so the interesting part of it was, out of that project, and it went really, really well, and the people were very excited, the women were very excited. It wasn't hard to recruit people because we had the agency as a base, so that's an easy recruitment. But from that, the stories were like the pictures they took, like one person put, like, if I win the lotto, that will be my life, I'll be able to live. Or that, the picture of milk and pop and the difference in the price. But then it came to the question of intimate partner violence came out in that study. So that was important because, we touched on a lot of subjects, but that one seemed to be a crucial project or issue, if you want, because many women who experience that, well, they can't live as well. They have a lot of issues. So Lynn did a second one on that. And so we use those photos and the voices and the women to tell the story in the community. And Lynn she still say, oh my gosh, that was so interesting. And I said, well, maybe we'll do another one, like later on. But to me, that was a very intimate project, and it was a shirt grant, and that was like winning the lotto when we got the shirt grant. So it was very helpful to have the money to do the project. So, and like I said, this fellow that I'm involved with now, the photographer Moncton, he's done cameras for healing, which is similar. So he did the stories with women and using camera, and now he's doing the VAT. So that I gravitate towards that kind of thing because it's creative, but it's also a chance for people to tell their story, and it lives on through story.
Maybe some more projects in the future.
You never know. I'm trying to be like, open up, let it happen. Yeah.
You've mentioned a few folks along the way in our conversation who have been important connections and friends and allies, but I'm wondering if there are other mentors that you have connected with along the way who you feel have helped you find your footing in leadership.
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think one of my dear friends, Ann Peary, who's a social worker, and she lives in New Brunswick, but we connected early on, and she was always like the cheerleader. Like when I wanted to start the organization way back, oh yes, you can do that. Oh yes, and she'd give me all this confidence. And sometimes I go, oh my goodness, can I really? But her voice has always been in my head. When I applied for the Senate, she was one of my references. She goes, oh yes, you can do that. And she'd always send me these lovely notes of encouragement. And I didn't always feel like I was doing that well at times, but her voice in my head. She came to Ottawa to one of the social work events there on the Hill, and it was so nice to have her there. And we worked together at the agency. We worked together on women who'd been sexually abused. So she's always been an important person to me, and will remain friends. it's not just about that, but we're friends as well. And then the other fellow is John Lutz, who was my first professor. And, I watched him, he worked in the prison system. And then laterally, when I started the group for men, he volunteered his time to work with single dads. And every now and then we talk about, he said that was one of the most meaningful things I've done, working with these fellows and, encouraging them in their lives and seeing their children. So he's been a mentor, and he's also helped me steer me towards when I'd be speaking on Black History Month. He knew some people in New Brunswick that were Black that I could speak about, and so these folks they're crucial to your profession, but it's also that they believe in you, and you believe in them. So those are two social workers for sure that I have the deepest respect for, and there's many other people that I've in my life, but I think like my aunt, in those early days, if I hadn't gone with her, maybe my life would be different. I don't know. Mm-hmm.
Are there any models or methods or books or perspectives that you've used along the way that are important to you? An author or an approach?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, there's probably lots, but I think I'm a sort of an eclectic person. I read different things and then I kind of put them together. So it's like I can't think off the top of my head of just one specific thing. But I guess one thing I wanted to say, in the questions, was when I did a lot of had placements for social workers on staff, in the agency. So one thing I want to say about that, maybe that's how do you introduce a social worker into an agency work? And one of the common things that young social workers say is, I just want to help. I don't know if you've heard that, but and that's quite a big statement to say because people don't always want your help, right? So maybe in the training, I don't know how we could do that better, but I think there's a way to do that. We might be able to do that to help younger folks who are getting into the profession. Like it can be, especially in New Brunswick, a lot of the professions, the social workers get to go in working for the government in child protection and things like that. And that's a hard job. So how do we help prepare them for what is a social worker? And I know young folks have quit because it just didn't fit. So I don't know if in the training, if that's something we could work through, or when we get them in the agency. And I remember one young woman, she said, well, what do I do? And I said, well, you say hello so those practical things, and it's not going to be that you may help them, And so so I don't know if there's any books on that, or study or ways but it is an issue, I think, in not maybe at all universities, but it's just that, they really want to help, but it's not that easy.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would agree with you, and I think many people would agree with you. We actually have a course at McMaster, ironically, the first year course, which is like an intro elective.
Yeah.
So folks who are maybe thinking about social work, and we call it So You Think You Can Help.
Oh, mate, that is perfect. Okay, so that's sort of, yeah. I think for me, the other thing too, that when I was doing all this and beginning and all this, I'd go to anything I could. Like if there was a community seminar, there was this, there was that, I'd attend or I'd read. And one of the things I find is different now in the workplace, I'm not going to say generalizing, but oh, well, that's after hours. I don't do that after hours, and that's fair. I know that my daughter says, Mom, I don't want to work like you did. I need my time off. So that's fair. But it's just that I think how I grew myself was I took advantage of anything I could to learn and grow, and read it on the weekend if you have to. But, people have got different boundaries now. And we have the phones now that's taking a lot of our time, right? Always online. And so I think it's a different time for work, and it's a different way to be. And so I think as an older woman now, I have to look and say, okay, so how will I mentor younger women? And they're mentoring me too, but it's a different time. I went to a business professional women's event the other night, which I belonged to many years ago, and I was looking around the room going, yeah, it's different now. And I can sit back and watch and think, and it's a different time. So in social work, it's a different time too, I'm sure. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, maybe we could just talk a little bit about that different time.
Yeah.
I mean, when you started your practice, we had maybe a little bit of a different attitude towards social work and how we understood it. Now we have professional regulation. There's a lot more boundaries around the profession. But the origin of, I always think of the origin of social work as, partly about women's good work, and
Yes.
then about women having an opportunity to work. And so lived experience and connection to community were often seen as fundamental, whereas the formal education, maybe we were a bit more flexible about it. I wonder if you just have any thoughts about that, about the benefits and challenges of the more formal regulated system versus the ways we used to do before.
Good question. I mean, that take a while to just dissect all that. And I think it's important to have regulations. I think that we need that, and as long as we don't go overboard. Like sometimes there's things that, like when I got grandfathered into social work association because my degree wasn't totally social work, and that was a lot of work. And I was so proud of myself when I got it, but not everybody would have the courage to do that, right? So sometimes you have a lot of experience. So how do you find a way to fit that into the box, right? So, but I do think, especially right now with so many like challenges in, could be criminal or whatever, like we have to be mindful of that. We want to make sure we have good standards. And I do think that like just being away for 8 years in Ottawa, back and forth, but just looking at my community now, things have changed. When I go to my class for line dancing, I drive up a certain street there and Monday night, and there's so many people that are homeless and so many issues that we didn't have 8 years ago. It was not like that. There was not that. So how do social workers play a role in this? What do we do about that? I often wonder if our social work associations became too regulated and not enough advocacy and stuff like that, or not maybe too, but there's got to be a mix there. How do we advocate for these changes too? Speak out. And unfortunately, sometimes the associations are government driven, so they can't always go against government, say, like, this needs to happen, let's protest on this or whatever. So I guess to find that balance, do you know what I'm saying? I'm just kind of talking around here, but I see the change of what's happening with our population, with the unhoused and addictions and all kinds of things. And yes, we need regulation, but how do social work associations and groups have a voice to make sure that we are moving towards change? Because it's not necessarily happening in all provinces. I don't know in Ontario what's going on there. Yeah, okay. So that's just something I've noticed, and I think, oh my gosh, I don't think our agency could function like it did before. Like it's totally different. And when I was in Ottawa, you'd walk over people on the street, near the Parliament. They were lying there, and everybody just walking by them, and thinking, oh my gosh, have we lost our compassion? How do we do this? Mm. Mm. Mm.
All right. So I'm just wondering if you've given us some sense of advice that you would give to emerging social workers who are wanting to be successful in their profession, to be leaders, to be innovators, to be change makers. I wonder if you have any other advice or wisdom that you would share with those emerging social workers, those budding social workers.
Well, I tell this to anybody who's new in any profession, even in my staff in Ottawa. Find someone to be your mentor, if you can, someone that you admire, or maybe more than one person. And then as you evolve, mentor other people. And you can do that even when you're starting. Like you can be a mentor or a support, I guess. And because I think that we can learn from each other. Because there's a difference between, say, when I went in as a mature student to maybe an 18 or 19, 20-year-old, like it's a different experience. But maybe I can learn from that person, they can learn from me. But it's like, I think you have to find your people that you can support you, because it's a tough go when you realize all the issues that have to be done. And if you're working in government, you've got policies. You can't break out of those policies. I always like to break the rules, but you can't. You're not supposed to. So, I think it's to try to find out how can you survive in those systems. But I mean, they go in because they have a heart for it. But it's not to lose the heart and not to get cynical. So how do they keep going?
And how did you do that? How did you keep your heart and not get cynical?
Well, people would say, "Oh, that must be such a tough job. It must be so horrible." I go, "No, I just find little glimmers of hope in people." And I mean, of course, you have things that are disappointing. But I remember, example, one of my clients from way back. I saw her at the hospital one day, and she said, "Oh, I bet," and she became a nurse. She said, "Oh, I bet you didn't think I'd become a nurse." I said, "I knew you'd do well." It's having that faith in that person. And, another woman that I met, she came to the office one day and she goes, "I need $10. I need to write my exam in St. John. I don't have money for gas." So I gave her $10. Now, some people say, "Well, oh, yeah, they're going to scam me." Well, maybe they would. But later on, I saw her at an event and she was volunteering for the cable company. She said, "Thank you. I got my degree. I'm not only volunteering, but I'm working here." So those little stories spurred me on. Now there's others that oh yes, yeah, that didn't work out the way. But I believe in the best, okay? And try to, balance it out. So try to look at that person's life as, you maybe had a supportive family, or you had this, or you had that. That person may not. My aunt would always say, "Where's their family?" And I'll go, "Well, maybe they don't have one. Or maybe their family was dysfunctional," right? I remember I went to a seminar once and the person said, "Raise your hand if everybody here had milk and cookies every day and, was supported by their family." Well, nobody raised their hand. Like, nobody has it perfect. But some people's stories, I mean, you've heard them. They're really tragic. And how do they survive? How do they have the resilience to go on? So as a social worker, we have to have that compassion and empathy.
Absolutely. So that kind of brings us to the end of our conversation, but I'm wondering, are there any other anecdotes or stories that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I think we've talked about a lot of things. I just want to say I'm very privileged to do this with you, Tara. It's been helping me to walk through my life, my profession, and it's kind of a way to bring closure to certain parts of my life, but also to remember who I am, because I am a social worker intrinsically inside of myself, and I do care about the better of society. And so it's been a privilege to have this chance to chat.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you.